Hi, let me just share my screen. Hi, my name is Pamela Hill and I'm an Android engineer and tech lead at the cryptocurrency company called Luno. You can find me on Twitter at Pamela A. Hill, and I also have a blog, pamelaahill.com. Welcome to my talk called Remote Work, Succeeding as a Team. Before I start, I want to thank a couple of people for helping me with this presentation. So from the top, Maya, June, Clara, Nick, and Cornel. And they come from all over the world, including South Africa and Belgium and also Germany. And they're also all remote workers, or at least remote-ish. And they really helped me sort of expand my knowledge of remote work, and also they gave me a lot of hints and tips that I could pass on to you. So my topic today is remote work, and you're probably attending this session for one of four reasons. Either you or your company are interested in going to remote, but you're not really sure if it's a good fit for you. Or you're already a remote worker, but you'd like to know how you can become more productive and how you can improve your collaboration. Or you're a very recent remote worker because of the lockdown and you're a little overwhelmed. So you need some life hacks to really get through this time. Or, oops, you're in the wrong session, but don't worry, you're welcome too. So perhaps you're in the first category and you're trying to evaluate whether going remote will be beneficial to you as an individual contributor. Or maybe you're a leader at your company and you're trying to determine whether becoming remote first or at least remote friendly will give you that competitive advantage. So to assist you in making an informed decision, we're going to be going through some advantages and disadvantages of remote work, which companies are successfully doing remote work, and how you can safely experiment with remote work to determine if it's right for you. Now, according to a very famous study on remote work called the Survey of Remote Work 2020 by Buffer, a very prominent remote company, there's a myriad of benefits to going remote. So what do you think the top benefit is? Well, 32% said the ability to have a flexible schedule. Life happens, and sometimes you need to go to the bank, sometimes your apartment's plumbing needs attention, and sometimes you just need to bliss out on a yoga class. Being a remote worker gives you that flexibility to attend to life when it happens. 26% said the ability to work from anywhere. As a remote worker, you have the freedom to travel and work from anywhere in the world. At least you used to. You don't have to wait until you retire for this freedom. In his book, The 4-Hour Work Week, Tim Ferriss actually referred to these workers as the new rich. 21% said not having to commute. If you calculate the cost of your commute, it's a simple calculation, but it actually has a really shocking answer. But there are also other things to consider. You're losing physical energy that you could have spent on hobbies or sports or playing with your children. You're also losing emotional energy that you could have spent listening and talking to your partner or friends. Your commute might also have a very significant environmental impact. 11% said the ability to spend time with family. And 7% said the ability to work from home, which also allows you to spend more time with the ideal coworkers. These guys. But in my mind, one of the considerable benefits that was missing here is the lack of interruptions from the open plan office. There's also an abundance of benefits for companies to go remote first or friendly. Firstly, the ability to go and hire the best talent from anywhere in the whole world, the rock stars. Companies no longer need to hire only in their own city, but can also employ the best Android engineer from Johannesburg, the edgiest designer from Amsterdam, and the spunkiest product designer from Chicago. There's also a reduced need for office space, very expensive office space. Now, for a very old school company, IBM is really forward thinking in this way. At IBM, 40% of its workforce went remote, meaning that they could reduce their office space by 78 million square feet. They sold some of it to the tune of $1.9 billion US, and they subleased some of it to the tune of $1 billion. Now, the annual savings amounted to $100 million in the US alone. Reduce risk. By centralizing your workforce, you are creating a central point of failure. And when one employee comes to work sick, everyone gets sick. And when there's adverse weather conditions, no one can get to work. So the same goes for the office's power, aircon, water, and also when the internet goes down. By allowing your employees to work at least some part of the day or some part of the week remotely, you're equipping them to handle these situations appropriately. It also lessens the environmental impact. In that same IBM study, employees saved 5 million gallons of fuel, or about 450,000 tons of CO2 emissions in just 1 year. You also are able to accommodate folks with disabilities. By allowing folks to work from home, you're actually leveling the playing field for folks with disabilities that need special equipment or care or other accommodations. For example, folks living with anxiety disorders, like me, benefit from working from home. According to that same State of Remote Work survey that we looked at before, there are some downsides, however. Let's have a look at the biggest struggles that remote workers faced. 20% said communication and collaboration and loneliness. 18% said the inability to unplug, and 12% said the distractions at home. 10% said working with teammates in different time zones, and 7% said staying motivated. 5% said taking vacation time, vacay time, and 3% said finding reliable Wi-Fi. So we'll be having a look at some ways to mitigate these challenges in the second section of this talk. It's really tempting to judge whether remote work will work for you and your team based on just pros and cons, but if you want to give remote work a real honest chance, you have to conduct an experiment, and I believe that it will require you to firstly give it sufficient time. You need to give that team enough time to adjust and also iron out all those kinks. About 3 months should suffice. There should be a phasing transition to full remote. Start with 1 day, then 2, then 3, and then finally go full remote. Existing employees are perfect for using in this experiment. They know everyone, they know how everything works, and they know what to do. Also use experienced employees. When I conducted my interviews, there was consensus that remote work is not suitable for juniors. In my mind, remote workers should be able to solve their own problems without significant assistance, and junior programmers might find this experiment too daunting. About 3 years experience in their competency should be enough. Lastly, the whole team should be remote, including product owners, their agile coaches, QA, and developers. The team should evaluate their experiences as a team rather than just a few sidelined individuals. Oops. But perhaps you and your team have already embraced remote work. So how do you ensure that everyone stays happy, productive and collaborative, and connected? That's pretty tricky, but this next section will be addressing the attributes and practices of remote workers and their companies, and how to mitigate some of those pesky cons we looked at before. So let's have a look at attributes of successful remote workers. Firstly, they're self-motivated. Great remote workers are internally motivated because they believe what they're doing has meaning and they derive some enjoyment from it. They're also super disciplined because they have to be able to work independently most of their day. And so they should also be able to remain focused for a reasonable amount of time and perform their work in a systematic and organized manner. Remote workers need to be proactive, and this attribute is particularly relevant when they have to work asynchronously to their team, such as when they're in different time zones. Remote workers should be proactive in asking questions and having the right conversations before they start their work. It's really frustrating to be blocked for most of the day because you're waiting for somebody somewhere else in the world to wake up so that you can just ask them a simple question. They're also very practical about solving distraction problems. It's really good to be honest with yourself about how you get distracted and be pragmatic in the way that you solve those distraction problems. For example, I know that if my house isn't clean, ain't no work happening. So I clean my house a little bit before and a lot after work, and I hire someone to help me once a week. Remote workers are also really good at time management. I use the Pomodoro technique so that I have some time to focus and then also a little bit of break time. They're also really great communicators. I can't emphasize this enough, guys. As a remote worker, you need to be able to structure and convey your thoughts in a very clear manner over multiple mediums, so email, Slack, or whatever medium you need to communicate via. You also need to be able to understand and kind of figure out what people are trying to say, which sometimes is a little bit hurried or said imperfectly. You should also be quite confident in asking questions. Now, when I first joined Luno, as is natural, I was a little bit hesitant to ask questions, but I had a lot of them because I lacked a lot of context. I felt a little bit embarrassed to ask too many questions, but in a remote environment, you need to be able to be confident enough to ask as many questions as you need to get your work done. And you also need to be okay with being alone for most of the day. Let's have a look at some practices of successful remote workers. Firstly, they have some morning and evening rituals. It's really easy for your work and home life separation to get very, very fuzzy very quickly. So it's a good idea to have some ceremonies in place that will mark the start and end of the day. For example, I make a cup of coffee or tea and I put it on my desk, start drinking it and get to work. And that is the signal for me to begin my work day. One of my interviewees, Maya, cooks dinner to mark the end of the work day. It's also really important to take care of yourself. When you have an office-based job, you're kind of used to having a routine where you get up, have breakfast, take a shower and then get dressed. And that is a normal thing for you. But with remote work, there's this joke. The longer I stay at home, the more homeless I look. And that's a real danger of letting things slip when you're at home all day and every day. Having a grooming routine and good habits like making a healthy lunch and exercising will enhance your quality of life. And by the way, if you think that people don't notice whether you've showered or not and you're working remote, they do. Know when to call it a day. Sometimes a day is really unproductive, and no matter how much effort you put into something, it just won't work. While this also happens with office-based workers, it's really tempting to feel that people think you're not working. So rather than working late into the night to make up for it, it's really imperative to know when to call it a day and try again tomorrow. Having a separate room for me to do my work has been a blessing. It really delineates between when I'm working and when I'm just playing. One of my interviewees, Maya again, said that she has a different device for doing her admin and side projects on from her work device. One of my interviewees, Nick, gave the following suggestions for avoiding cabin fever. He said, one day a week, go somewhere else. Go sit in a library or in a coffee shop or a co-working space and work from there. Now, while this isn't, most of these aren't really appropriate for lockdown, it's something to remember for later. Take a regular lunch break for an hour or two and do some exercise and make a healthy lunch. And when you feel stuck on a problem, go for a walk. It really does wonders to clear the mind. Intellectual greats like Carl Jung actually use this practice. I live alone, so I make sure that I put extra effort into making social engagements for each week so that I keep socially active. But behind every great remote worker is a great remote first or friendly company. Let's have a detailed look at the practices of these companies. They're very careful about how they hire, and they do thoughtful onboarding. They have a trusting leadership, and they're careful about how they conduct their meetings. They formalize communication etiquette, they facilitate making connections, and they manage their time zone differences very carefully. They also use the tools. So Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin Group, had the following to say about hiring and trust. He said, to successfully work with other people, you have to trust each other. A big part of trusting each other to get their work done wherever they are without supervision. Chris Hoffman from the IT Collective had something a little stronger to say about trust issues. He said, if we're struggling with trust issues, it means that we made a poor hiring decision. If a team member isn't producing good results or can't manage their own schedule or workload, we aren't going to continue to work with this person. We have no desire to be babysitters all day. So when you hire a remote worker, there's a couple of things that you need to determine, like this person is not a jerk. They're smart, they get things done, they're great communicators, and they're a good fit for remote. Now, how do you determine that? How do you determine whether a candidate fits these criteria? Well, in my hiring process at Luno, I had 4 interviews and 2 technical tests. I was interviewed by my line manager, my CTO, my engineering manager, and also a teammate. And all of these interviews were remote. I did a HackerRank test, and I also built a small app for them. A pretty thorough process, I would say. When you now successfully have your candidate become an employee, it's really important to have very thoughtful onboarding. So for onboarding, it's really important that that person is physically there in the office. The travel might be unpleasant, but it will be worth doing in the long run. It's really important for that person to get loads and loads of context. Why was your company established? What are its values? What are its policies? What is on the roadmap? And who are their teammates? It's a real challenge for software engineers not to just jump into the code base and start fixing things and scrounging around on day one, I know. But investing the time into getting a lot of context is going to help you in the long run. It's also really important to meet everyone, to put names to faces, and to shake a lot of hands. Buddy up your new employees with someone in their competency, and it should be someone that they feel comfortable with and safe to ask questions and ask for feedback too. And even tougher than remembering all those names and faces is remembering what you learned during onboarding. So write up a guide reiterating the most important facts. Get the new employee to work on the code base by writing a small app according to the app's architecture and get it reviewed so you can get used to the process. And lastly, everyone likes a nice little piece of swag. So during my onboarding at Luno, I spent 2 weeks in Cape Town, and it was really invaluable because I gained a lot of context about the cryptocurrency space that I lacked before. And I met and bonded a lot with my co-workers and my teammates. A lot of good, very forward-thinking leaders struggle with the concept of leading remote teams. And the question most often asked is, how do I know if people are working? And my answer to that is firstly that the principles stay the same. In their book on remote leadership called The Long Distance Worker, Eikenberry and Termal actually say that the principles of leadership stay the same, but the application differs for remote work. For example, the following stays the same. The leader's primary focus is still people, and they need to understand human behavior. They need to understand how people work. The skills and characteristics stay the same. The role of leaders are still to coach and to encourage and to influence and to communicate. And the high level expectation of output is still to hit targets, finish projects, and meet budgets and so on. But rather than managing bums in seats, the remote leader knows that his role or her role is to enable his workers to get their best, to do their best by guiding and encouraging them. Trust also plays a huge role in managing remote teams and requires a big mind shift. So traditional leadership thinks Pamela's in her seat from 9 to 5 and sometimes a bit longer. She must be a great worker. And remote leadership thinks Pamela delivers all her projects on time, the quality is great, the features are great, the customers love it. She is a good worker. Leaders should also lastly have regular check-ins with their reports. These meetings ensure that their workers understand what's going on in the company. It builds trust and ensures that you can highlight some potential problems that will hamper delivery. Meetings. Love them or hate them, sometimes they are necessary. And for remote workers in their teams, there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. Firstly, they aren't time fillers. Some managers love meetings, and they shouldn't be for their own sake or to amuse bored managers. They can be immensely disruptive for teams and can be extremely expensive when you do the calculations. Development teams need time of uninterrupted deep work time, and scheduling too many meetings can disrupt their flow. Sessions should be short and focused and have some body breaks in between if they're scheduled in succession. Also be mindful of time zones. If there's a massive difference, it's almost impossible to have everyone in every meeting. But no one likes being excluded, so it's best to try and schedule your meetings when there is some overlap. At Luno, one of our teams actually has their stand-ups later in the day to accommodate a colleague in Canada. It's also imperative to have an agenda to keep the meetings short and focused, and also know what your required outcomes are going to be. Your team should run through the agenda beforehand and really become prepared for participating if the agenda in the meeting gets a bit long, rather vote on what you're going to discuss beforehand and then offload some of the discussions onto Slack. I have the memory of a goldfish. No, I'm kidding. So I need meeting notes to remember what happened. I'm sure that I'm also not the only one. And not every team member will be able to attend every meeting, so especially if they're in different time zones. And taking notes or recording that meeting will help them catch up, and then also feedback when it's necessary. Now, one of my favorite tips is one person per screen. When companies only have a few remote workers, they often get sidelined in meetings because they're just the picture on the wall. What their colleagues might not realize is that it's often very difficult to hear in a noisy environment or when people talk over each other. Sometimes it's also really challenging to comment when nobody can hear you. To avoid this problem, many companies have a one person per screen policy where everyone dials in from their computer, and then everyone is on an equal footing. Tools like Slack are really useful for keeping in touch and asking questions and making decisions without really time-consuming meetings. But here's a few things to keep in mind when using Slack. Firstly, put some thought into your channel organization. Separate your team channels from your support channels and your informal chats from your formal work channels. It's perfectly okay to mute noisy channels that don't relate to your day-to-day work, and only check them when you have some free time. I would also like to say that it's also okay to switch off your notifications for some deep work time. But there is definite benefit in having a water cooler type channel for just sharing an article or a safer work joke. Despite websites constantly checking, we're not robots, and a quick smile can do wonders to lift the spirits. Think before you type. Don't verbalize every brain fart that comes through your head. Sometimes simply Googling your question will teach you a lot more about a subject than asking your colleagues. But on the other hand, also don't be afraid to ask questions. Sometimes you don't have enough context or you need to brainstorm an idea. And then it's okay to ask as many questions as you need to get your work done. It's preferable to ask a question than to be shy or too proud and waste time. This hesitation is something I struggled with when I started doing remote work, but it's important to just get over it. When you do, just before you type send, try to organize your thought logically, making your question and comment as clear and precise as possible. And this will also improve the quality of responses that you get. Group these conversations into threads so it doesn't pollute the channel and it makes it easier to refer back to at a later stage. A very nice tip is to acknowledge the posts that's been made with a reaction. As you might have guessed, I thoroughly encourage the use of emojis. My favorite one for release announcements, I use Party Corgi. Unless you're gossiping, don't direct message or DM. Also, don't gossip. Sometimes your colleagues are thinking and feeling what you are, but they're not open to acknowledging it. And open communication will solve problems and allow you to bond with your team a lot better. Tying into my previous point, if you DM, no one can refer back to your conversation, to that conversation history and learn from it. Sometimes they have the same question or they need a refresher on that conversation, and Slack is searchable so they can actually use that as an informal knowledge base. Have one place, however, that you make and document decisions. It doesn't have to be Slack. Just be consistent, whether it's a Google Doc, Meeting Notes, or Slack. One last thing, keep it to good vibes only. If you need to have serious conversation, don't fight it out on Slack. A lot of nuances go missing in text-only chat, and no matter how many emojis you use, and have an online meeting where you can see each other's faces and body language. Making connections can be tricky when you're not physically there, but it's not an impossible task. So I have regular one-on-ones with my line manager, my mentor/accountability partner, and also those under my tech leadership. Slack also has a great integration tool called Donut, where you can match up random folks in the company for a month. And you can have a virtual coffee with them, have a little bit of a chat, see if there's any commonalities, and maybe make a new friend. One of my interviewees, Jeroen, randomly selects a colleague from his company called Played, and he just arranges a video call with them to talk about random things. I also like the idea of an annual or biannual summit where everyone gets together, strategizes, does team buildings, or just hangs out to make those connections, to solidify those connections a bit better. When it comes to online team buildings, please be cognizant that nobody likes being left out, and remote workers are often not considered when planning those team buildings. Consider activities that will allow remote workers to participate, like online gaming. My team and I recently did some Pictionary online, and it was a lot of fun. For team lunches, allow your remote workers to expense their lunch and dial them in. It might not be as fun or as vibey as going to a restaurant, but your remote workers are definitely going to appreciate the effort that you put in. Lastly, and a little bit more loosely to making connections within the company, attend conferences and meetups to meet people outside of your company. Find meetups in your area that suit your competency or your interests and make a point of regularly attending to meet them. I found that in the past, the best way to actually get involved in the community is to volunteer as a speaker, and it's not as scary as it sounds. People will naturally reach out to you at the event or online afterwards, asking questions, and it opens the door for future collaborations. Everyone that I actually interviewed I met at some or other conference or meetup. It sounds really great that you can hire the best talent from all over the world, right? But how does one collaborate and be productive if your team is distributed across multiple time zones? Firstly, it's really important to decide on a maximum amount of, or at least a minimum amount of overlap in hours. The authors of the book Remote Work, Office Not Required, Fried and Hansen from 37 Signals, suggests no less than 4 hours overlap, which is a really good rule of thumb. That means 4 hours collaborating. Some folks that I interviewed also decided to start their days earlier or later to accommodate time zone differences. But there's definite dangers to making this decision. Firstly, be careful that your workday doesn't actually bleed into the rest of your day. And secondly, you might find that if you're an early bird, you need to start work, but you need to start your work later because your team only starts later, that you end up using your most productive hours doing chores. And lastly, async communication is really the biggest panacea for working across multiple time zones, but it is incredibly difficult to get right. You need to be able to do a full day's work without input from anybody else. And you really need to be careful in planning out your work, being proactive about asking the questions and having the conversations before you start. Let's have a look at some tools that you need in your toolbox. Well, instant messaging is rather ubiquitous in the modern life. There's also you also need some video conferencing and screen sharing. At Luno, we follow agile practices and ceremonies. So we use a little website called Hajitsu for estimation, and for retrospectives, we use either go the basic route with Fun Retro, or the very fun route with Mural. For storyboarding and whiteboarding, we just use Miro. You can also go the all-in-one route with Basecamp for project management and internal communication. Now, I realize that a lot of you are very, very new to remote work due to this current pandemic. So I realized that some of the tips and tricks that I gave you was maybe not completely applicable to you. So I realized that you need something to help you make the best out of this time. But first I need to say this. Remote work is not lockdown. Unfortunately, what you're seeing is a very quick and nasty implementation of remote work, with all of the cons and none of the pros. The reality is, while most companies are patting themselves on the back for getting remote work done so quickly, I see you on LinkedIn, their implementation was left too late to make the transition easy for their workers. So I asked a couple of people what their biggest challenges were for becoming remote workers really, really quickly. Barak said, setting up my space at home to be ready for work was very hard. Being so used to my office space and then having to recreate it at home was a struggle. So my suggestions are to you as follows. So long-time remote workers have had the time to purchase standing desks and ergonomic chairs, but you don't have that luxury. So the best you can do is make your space as comfy and cozy as possible. If your chair, try and find the most comfortable chair that allows you to do work properly, and surround yourself with your favorite things like pictures of pets or family, and a little bit of greenery also helps. Having a dedicated workspace will help with differentiating between work and rest time. It doesn't have to be a whole room, it can just be a little nook, as long as it's not a shared work play kind of space. And please don't work from bed or the couch. It gets uncomfortable really quickly and doesn't help you to make that distinction. Try and get a space where there's a little bit of natural sunlight. If you do have a room all to yourself, try to explain the closed and open door policy to your family. I said try because it may or may not work based on the age of your kids. Danae said, not having a clearer separation between work and the rest of life. Everything kind of blends together from the moment I wake up until I get into bed, and it's hard to be disciplined about downtime. Miroslav said, knowing when to switch off. The line between work and life can become blurred, and it makes it difficult to know when to disconnect. So while we've spoken about having those ceremonies for beginning and ending your day, I do have two additional suggestions that you can look at. I recently read the book Make Time, How to Focus on What Matters Every Day by ex-Googlers Knop and Zaratsky. The too long didn't read version of it is as follows. Firstly, choose a highlight. What would really make your day if you could complete it? That's your highlight. It doesn't have to be a work task like finishing a Jira ticket, but it can be something like cooking dinner with your family, or even completing that Taj Mahal Lego project that you've been working on. And then block your calendar, or more appropriately, bulldoze your calendar so that you make time for your highlight. Then design your day. You don't have to have a fancy daily planner. A piece of paper will suffice where you divide the day into half-hour sections. Plan what you're going to be doing for every one of those sections, and remember to include your morning and evening rituals. And then, if you find this useful, create a template to save time. My last suggestion is to gamify your to-do list with Habitica. I'm a huge skeptic when it comes to gamification, but this website and app has really become very addictive, and I've managed to develop a couple of great habits. With Habitica, you can set up some regular habits, daily tasks, and once-off to-dos. For every task you complete, you get some experience and gold coins. And with those gold coins, you can buy rewards. Now, for my rewards, when it's not lockdown, is things like going for a nice coffee, having a massage or facial, or ordering Uber Eats. Or you can buy equipment for your character. You can see my little character on the right-hand side. So while we're in lockdown, I'm just buying equipment. You can also form parties and go on quests with friends. And it's really, really fun. And I've picked up some great self-care habits along the way. So during this time, things will undoubtedly go awry. Whether it's your kids running into the background when you're on a video call with the BBC, I know that happens to me very often, or your cat or the Hadidas singing the song of its people from outside the door, laugh it off because everybody else is. And lastly, some good advice from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't panic. I would suggest these following resources. The first one, remote office not required, would be a good idea if you want to become a remote worker. And for leaders like managers or tech leads, the long distance leader. You can also find an article with some extra resources on my blog. And with that, thank you. Are there any questions? You can tweet at me or
Hi everyone. So welcome to my home. I just want to thank you for attending my live stream. It was awesome to see all your questions and comments and all the amazing things. And I just want to say thanks to Candice and Robert also for having me as a speaker for the second year. So I had a couple of questions on Slack, which I'm going to answer first, and I'm going to try and be as quick as possible to get through as many questions as I can. So Samantha asked, I'm still finding SA companies objecting to remote options. Is this a control reason? And yes, it's a control reason. As I was saying in the leadership section, a lot of managers actually think that their job is to manage bums on seats, rather than the output of people. So I really recommend that book that I mentioned at the end of the talk about remote leadership. It's a more traditional kind of leadership book, but I think it will really help them get that mindset shift on how to go from a traditional team to a remote team. But it's also like something that a lot of people always ask, how do I know if people are working? And the answer is you don't know what they're doing every second of the day, but that also doesn't matter because you're paying them for output. You're not paying them for, sitting in front of the computer. In fact, there was a huge issue with a very big retailer in America, where most of the staff were just spending time on YouTube all the time, but their bums were in the seats. So it's a mind shift, but it's also, I think it's actually paying people for the work that they're doing rather than paying them for just sitting around. Okay, let's have a look at another question. I hope you can all hear me. What is a good, so Scalp Webner asked, what is a good onboarding time frame? And he guesses that maybe that will depend on the complexity. So at Luno, I had a 2-week on-site onboarding, and I found that was good enough because we spent the first week very intensively talking about crypto and talking about all the policies and processes and how everything works. And then we did like a little toy project for for another week. So I was able to sit with my mentor and really, go through the processes, how to get things code reviewed. What are we looking for when we do code reviews? So I think 2 weeks is sufficient, but give people a chance to get better at communication, because communication is something that and especially over communication is something that you learn rather, on the job, rather than something that you're kind of born with. So give people a chance to get better at that. Okay, let's have a look at some other ones. JP Russell asked, do you see South Africa adopting remote offices for teams to meet up and hire out a room for a particular part of the day? In the book that I referred to a lot, that remote office not required, they actually said it's, and that companies, the writers were from 37 Signals. They actually say that a lot of companies just have like a staging kind of environment for investors, and then developers would be contracted in to quickly, come and say hi, and so, just to give comfort to the investors that they actually have an office and a physical presence. So maybe Skulk Verbner also asked, what is the Pomodoro technique? So Pomodoro is Italian for tomato, and it's based on a little tomato timer of 25 minutes, which you use for focus time, and 5 minutes, which you use for break time. So you would basically start the timer and really go all out and do your deep work for that 25 minutes. And then, have your little break, have some coffee, have a body break, and so on. There is a book out from the Pragmatic Programmers on that technique that you can have a look at. It's an ebook. So that's also a really great idea. You can also have a look at, if you're on a Mac, there's a program called Focus To Do that will give you that chance to do Pomodoro on your Mac. JP Russell asked, were you drinking coffee or tea, and how was it? So I was drinking coffee, and I have a very fancy coffee machine called, I think it's the DeLonghi Prima Donna, and it is a Prima Donna, but it was pretty good, thank you. Rhiannell, who I think I've seen on Twitter, asked, how do you build and maintain a team culture in a remote team? I think it helps to meet the team as part of the onboarding process, but how do you maintain the momentum? So yes, the onboarding process really, really helps. But having those daily conversations, like for example, in stand-up, and we have agile, we follow agile ceremonies. So we tend to, just chat a little bit before and afterwards. But we also have things like pictures of the day or songs of the day that we post in Slack channels, and that kind of keeps things going. But you also need to know what the company values are and really believe it in your heart. I know it sounds a bit funny, but Luno used to have these cool emoji based values. They had a little unicorn that says, don't accept the status quo, or a little ship that talks about taking ownership. So these were things that I really resonated with when I joined Luno, and I think that is the way that you kind of communicate and keep the momentum going, is with having those values and referring to those values a lot in your conversations. But I think it's also to do with the day-to-day, how you communicate on Slack and how you communicate in your stand-ups and so on. So my last question here is from Ivan. Besides the current global, so if I get cut off, sorry. Besides the current global coronavirus, which now forces us into remote work, we also have load shedding. What is your advice? So I have a really cool, I have fiber at home. I use a little UPS that you can buy from, and it works brilliantly. The only problem that I have during load shedding is that I don't have a regular supply of coffee. So it's a tiny little UPS. You might have to buy a splitter for it, but it works pretty well. For not attending the scheduled meetings, I am able to attend the scheduled meetings, but you should also be able to do recordings and meeting notes like I suggested. Okay, guys, and girls, thank you very much for your time, and I hope that you enjoyed my session. Bye-bye.